I used to greatly identify with terms like overachiever, high performer, type A personality, busy bee, someone who does it all, and bonus points if you look good while doing it. I think I'm the textbook case of attaching my productivity to my self-worth. I think this comes with being first generation American, coming from an immigrant household, really wanting to make my parents proud. And in some ways, I have, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've been given. Now that I'm a little bit older, I find that this trap of productivity is only holding me back. So now I'm working on detaching my self-worth from my productivity, telling myself that my worth does not equal my work. My value does not lie in my output. But damn, it is so freaking hard. I'm worried that if I relax now, I'll lose everything that I worked hard for. I'm nervous that it'll make my friends, even my followers, see me as somehow lazy or privileged, like must be nice to take time off. And yeah, it is really nice, and I love my flexible work schedule. But I've kind of created this beast that I always have to keep feeding because I have a flexible work schedule. I tell myself that I must always be working. Even when I'm resting, I'm still thinking about work. So is it really rest? For so long, I didn't want to be average, or I wasn't allowed to be average. I didn't feel good enough just as I am because, again, I was always so validated for my grades, for what I did, what I accomplished, always feeling this need to prove myself. So in this dire need to not be average, I started sinking into self-judgment, which ironically is so average. So many people are walking around judging themselves, judging the people around them. So many people wear busy as a badge of honor that we're all like these buzzing, busy bees. And it's an endless competition of who can buzz the loudest and be the busiest. And I just think that that is no way to live life. I don't want to live my life that way. As I think about becoming a mom, a part of me wants to work as hard as possible right now while I don't have kids so that I can take an extended maternity leave and actually spend time with my baby. But then the other part of me really knows that I need to solidify a sustainable relationship with productivity and rest so that when the time does come for me to only focus on my baby, I don't want to feel guilty for doing so, because at the rate that I was going, even just a couple of years ago, any moment of not doing something made me feel like a piece of shit. Your value does not lie in a number, whether that's the number of things checked off your to-do list or the amount of money in your bank account, and your output does not determine how loved you are. There's this book that I have already told you about many times, but if there's any book recommendation that you take from this podcast, let it be 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. And it's by this author. His name is Oliver Burkeman. Granted, he's like a middle-aged British guy, and I don't follow that many middle-aged men who talk about productivity. That's not really what I'm about. But I really, really resonate with the way that he talks about productivity almost as like not the goal, even though he kind of hooks people in by, subtitling his book Productivity for Mortals. Ultimately, the premise of the book is about how time is your only non-renewable resource. So how do you want to be spending it? Do you want to be checking things off of your to-do list, feeling good about yourself for a moment, only to realize that that to-do list is getting longer and you never really feel satisfied with where you're at in life because there's always something else, something more that you could be doing? My favorite idea from this book is that you are an infinite being with a finite capacity. What this means is that what you can be doing with your time, the potential trajectories of your life, those are endless. You could always be wishing for more, chasing more, wanting something different. But where you are now, the resources you have to work with, the time and energy and attention that you have in your mind and your body, it is finite. So you have to choose very intentionally how you want to spend your time. There's a passage from this book where he writes, "Productivity is a trap. Becoming more efficient just makes you more rushed, and trying to clear the decks simply makes them fill up again faster." Nobody in the history of humanity has ever achieved work-life balance, whatever that might be, and you certainly won't get there by copying the 6 things successful people do before 7 a.m. The day will never arrive when you finally have everything under control, when the flood of emails has been contained, when your to-do lists have stopped getting longer, when you're meeting all your obligations at work and in your home life, when nobody's angry with you for missing a deadline or dropping the ball, and when the fully optimized person you've become can turn, at long last, to the things life is really supposed to be about. Let's start by admitting the defeat. None of this is ever going to happen. But you know what? That's excellent news. Again, that's the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. As always, everything mentioned in this podcast episode will be linked in the description, including book recommendations. He goes on to write about how now you're free. You're essentially free to choose how you want to spend your time, but you won't ever feel free to choose if you're constantly chasing productivity. That's when you're going to feel spread thin, subject to other people's agendas, self-sacrificing, self-sabotaging, never living up to the potential of what you could be or should be. Now I want you to think about the little things that bring you joy. Maybe it's your plants, your pets, your kids, gardening, fresh air, being out in nature in general, spending time with friends, lingering at the door, not wanting to hang up the phone and say goodbye. Notice how all of these things, whether they're people or creatures or the way that time is spent, notice how it is innately unproductive. It's almost like the things that are most meaningful, the things that bring us joy, are actually the parts of our lives that are slowed down, where we're the most present and connected with the people we love, with our surroundings, with all 5 senses. That is when we feel our best, wouldn't you agree? How dare you believe that your value lies in your output if all the things that you treasure and cherish the most don't have an output? You love them because they are. You enjoy them because they just exist. You're able to rejoice in the in-between moments, not the do's and don'ts, but rather the doing, the process, just being. If you want to bring joy to the world and joy to yourself, you must trade your productivity for your presence. This reminds me of another book that I really enjoyed. It's called How to Do Nothing. Great title. It's by Jenny Odell. Apparently Barack Obama has recommended this book. He put it up on his Instagram that he was reading it. It was a few years back, I think during the pandemic. And it made me think, like, if the former president of the United States is reading a book called How to Do Nothing, then that means somebody who has, in a sense, made it, regardless of how you feel or felt about him as a president. This is somebody who went pretty far in life. If you ask my immigrant parents, this is as far as you possibly can go. So this book, it's called How to Do Nothing. I picked it up in the pandemic because I realized that one thing that happened, or one result of COVID for me, is that I started working a lot and almost burning myself out. I think burnout is a big word. I won't say I was completely burnt out, but I definitely was filling so much of my time and taking a lot of pride in productivity. It made me feel like I had a sense of control when everything fell out of control. And as somebody who grew up in chaos, it was like my comfort zone to try and thrive in chaos. So that's exactly what I did. And somebody gifted me this book, How to Do Nothing. And the book is pretty dense. The way it's written is very academic, full of big words. My ESL brain kind of struggled to grasp it all in its entirety. I felt like every paragraph took me forever. There were times when I'm like, just get to the point. I don't understand. And then I realized maybe that is the point. Maybe the fact that I had to sit with this book passage by passage, digesting the nuances of it, maybe that is in some ways doing nothing. If you read a lot of self-help books, you'll know that usually they're like, here's step by step what you're supposed to do to achieve these amazing, productive, efficient results by 7 a.m. every morning. And this book was literally the opposite of that. The subtitle is called Resisting the Attention Economy. So this book weaves in not just like the importance of rest, but also the way technology, the internet plays in with how we consume information, how that changes our worldview and the way that we value ourselves. Also, there's a passage where Jenny Odell writes, she's talking about a tree. I think this tree, how she named the tree, is Old Savior. And basically, this tree is there for hundreds of years. It kind of does nothing, but yet it's so grand and breathtaking to like be with this tree, even though it's not doing anything. She writes, the tree provides me with an image of resistance in place. To resist in place is to make oneself into a shape that cannot so easily be appropriated by a capitalist value system. To do this means refusing the frame of reference. In this case, a frame of reference in which value is determined by productivity, the strength of one's career, and individual entrepreneurship. It means embracing and trying to inhabit somewhat fuzzier or blobbier ideas. I love that word, blobbier. Of maintenance as productivity, of the importance of nonverbal communication, and of the mere experience of life as the highest goal. Life as the highest goal. What if you've already made it just because you're living life? That's it. That highest goal is achieved. There's nothing else for you to do. She goes on to say, it means recognizing and celebrating a form of the self that changes over time, exceeds algorithmic description, and whose identity doesn't always stop at the boundary of the individual. That last part I kind of struggled with. I'm not quite sure what that means, whose identity doesn't always stop at the boundary of the individual. So if that resonates with you in any way, or if you understand it somehow, feel free to write me a message. I'd love to know what you think the author means by that, because I didn't quite grasp it. Let's move on to talk about some practical tips now that we've covered so much of the esoteric, and hopefully I've convinced you that productivity is a trap and your worth is not tied to your work or your output or what you do in any way. I think at first we kind of have to trick our brains. We've been brainwashed and conditioned for so long to think that productivity is the highest virtue. So for a little bit, as you're undoing this conditioning, it might help to tell yourself something like rest is productive. Not because everything has to be productive, but because as a starting point, if you're anything like me and you still want to be productive, a good starting point might be scheduling spaciousness into your day. If you have to physically go to your Google Calendar and block out time slots for pleasure and play and pause, title these time blocks as something that's gonna feel compelling to your brain, like pause and go outside. You might feel like it's on your calendar, it's quote unquote a thing to do, so you might feel productive doing it until eventually pausing and going outside is something that your soul craves, not because it makes you productive or feel any better, but just because it's good in and of itself. If you're still operating from a to-do list, which I feel like I can't completely give up, I kind of created this system for myself where I still have my planner and I'll still write like a brain dump, a to-do list. I think that can really help getting things out of your head and onto paper. But I have a separate section called my one thing. So when you're looking at your to-do list, ask yourself, what is one thing that needs to get done in order for me to feel lighter? Just one thing. Maybe on a Saturday, it's watering your plants. On a Monday, it's sending that one email. On a Thursday, creating that project proposal. Whatever that one thing is. Just one. Sometimes I can't do one and I put 3 and then I'm like, no, Mary, it has to be one. I'm telling you right now, it has to be one. Immediately, it tells you what's the most important, not what's urgent, but what's important, what's going to take a lot of weight off of you in order to do everything else on your to-do list without a sense of panic and anxiety. When it comes to the to-do list, I have such a complicated relationship with it because there are days when I get high checking things off of my to-do list. Like today, kind of, I accidentally had 2 servings of matcha in my latte. Don't ask me how, but then I got this burst of energy and I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And then there are other days like yesterday where looking at my to-do list was so daunting, exhausting prematurely, and I just mentally start shutting down and self-sabotaging because it's just overwhelming. So doing this practice of like the one thing, what is your one thing? It almost helps me wean off this drug of productivity. Because I think in a sense, productivity is kind of like a drug. It makes us high sometimes, and then other times it's debilitating because you almost can't live without it. Slowly but surely just untie those little aspects where our self-worth is gripping onto how productive we are. So what is your one thing? And the last thing that I'm going to leave you with is actually like a big prompt. It could be a journaling prompt. It could be a thinking prompt. Feel free to write me a message. I think I'm going to start doing this at the end of podcast episodes, maybe giving you like a prompt or something to think about. And you're welcome to respond, I guess, in our Mary's Podcast Instagram account. I think that will help me feel like this podcast is less one-sided and more of a conversation, and hopefully also motivate you to continue certain self-love practices. Even if you're not putting pen to paper and journaling, maybe you could put fingertips to your phone and send me a message so I can hear how you like this episode also. So today's prompt is, what are you unwilling to feel? Staying busy is helping you avoid something. What is it? What is it doing for you?